Bellevue Hospital, New York City. Christmas Eve, 1926. The smell of bleach and stale sweat hung heavy in the emergency room. A man stumbled through the swinging doors, his hands shaking violently, screaming that Santa Claus was chasing him down the street with a baseball bat. Before the nurses could strap him to a cot, his heart stopped. He was the first to fall that night, but the poison was just getting started. You're up late. Pull up a chair. I know the wire was dead last week. The radio was silent, and I owe you an explanation. I was tracking down a lead on a bootlegger's funeral in Chicago. It was just a stack of old undertaking receipts, but the ink on those receipts bled right into a stack of morgue reports from New York. 2 stories sitting on my desk, tangling together until I couldn't pull them apart. They both end in the same cold earth. So tonight, we cover both. Listen to the rain against the glass tonight. It's coming down hard on Mount Hood. It makes the booth feel small, but safe. Safe is a rare commodity. In 1920, the country went dry. The Volstead Act shut the saloons and turned off the taps. But a law doesn't kill a thirst. It just forces it into the alleys. The syndicates needed cheap alcohol to feed the speakeasies. The easiest place to find it was inside industrial supply warehouses. Factories used millions of gallons of denatured alcohol to make paint, perfume, and cleaning fluid. The bootleggers stole it by the truckload. They paid underworld chemists to renature it, boiling it in illegal stills to make it drinkable again. The government knew they were doing this. They knew citizens were drinking it in the back parlors, so they made it lethal. Federal authorities ordered manufacturers to dump violent poisons into the industrial vats. They added kerosene, gasoline, benzene, and chloroform, but the deadliest addition was methyl alcohol, wood alcohol. Bootleggers tried to boil the toxins out, but grain alcohol boils at 173 degrees, and wood alcohol boils at 151 degrees. The toxins evaporated into the condenser together. You couldn't pull them apart. Even a fraction of an ounce left behind attacked the human optic nerve. It caused blindness. It caused paralysis. It caused death. The government knew the bootleg chemists were failing. They knew the poor and the desperate were drinking the rot gut anyway. By 1927, the Treasury Department doubled down. They ordered the factories to increase the dose of wood alcohol, demanding it make up a full 10% of the liquid. The results hit Bellevue Hospital on that Christmas Eve in 1926. After the man terrified of Santa Claus died, another holiday partygoer collapsed, then another. By Christmas night, 60 people were violently ill and 8 were dead. In the days that followed, the morgue ran out of slabs. 41 people died on New Year's Day. New York's chief medical examiner, Charles Norris, looked at the bodies stacking up. He called it an essay in extermination. He stated on the record that the United States government was responsible for mass murder. The truth was cold. The government decided that anyone who violated Prohibition was a criminal, and criminals didn't deserve to live. By the time the noble experiment ended, the government's poisoned alcohol had killed an estimated 10,000 Americans. 10,000 bodies, blinded, paralyzed, and suffocated by their own government, all to uphold a moral law. And it wasn't just the feds. In 1930, 2 bootleggers in Boston decided to cut corners on a legal medicinal tonic called Jamaica ginger. They adulterated it with a chemical called lindol, a tasteless plasticizer used to make explosives. It destroyed the nerve cells in the human spine. Up to 100,000 people drank Ginger Jake and lost the use of their legs. They dragged their feet through the dirt, afflicted with a permanent limp known as the Jake Walk. Blues bands wrote songs about the misery. Men were crippled for life just for a cheap high. I'm pouring a shot of rye tonight. The coffee isn't cutting it. The bite of the whiskey is a comfort when the history gets this dark. While the poor were dying in the gutters, the men selling them the poison were building empires. The money was staggering. Chicago became a war zone, carved up by men in tailored suits and fedoras. On the south side, you had John Torrio and his hulking protege, Al Capone. On the north side, Dion O'Banion ran the show. O'Banion was a bootlegger, a killer, and a florist. He owned Schofield's flower shop, sitting right across the street from Holy Name Cathedral. He loved chrysanthemums. He arranged the flowers for the weddings and the funerals of the very men he fought. But O'Banion pushed too far. He crossed Torrio and Capone over a brewery deal. On November the 10th, 1924, O'Banion was clipping flowers in his shop. 3 men walked in. O'Banion smiled and reached out to shake hands. One of the men grabbed his hand in a vice grip, the fatal Chicago handshake, pulling him off balance. The other 2 shot him in the head, the throat, and the chest. That hit sparked a brutal street war. Torrio was nearly killed in an ambush and fled the city, leaving the 26-year-old Al Capone in charge of the Chicago outfit. The streets ran with blood, and the funerals became a theater of the absurd. These men came from the slums. Their fathers were ditch diggers and shoemakers. Now they were millionaires, and they wanted the world to know it, even when they were dead. When O'Banion was buried, it was a spectacle. He went into the earth in a $10,000 casket fitted with silver angels. $50,000 worth of floral arrangements followed him to the dirt. Thousands of people lined the streets to watch the procession. The rival gangs took notes. Death wasn't just a consequence, it was a competition. 6 months later, Angelo Genna, a ruthless crime boss from Little Italy, was gunned down after a high-speed chase. His family wanted to belittle O'Banion's funeral. They bought him a massive bronze coffin. They ordered $75,000 worth of flowers, and in the ultimate insult, they bought most of those flowers from O'Banion's old shop. This is where the 2 stories collide. This is what I was looking at last week. I was looking at the undertakers, the men who cleaned up the mess. You see, everyone in the 1920s was running a racket. The government was poisoning the citizens. The mobsters were killing each other for the right to sell the poison. And the undertakers? They were robbing the mobsters. When a boss went down, the surviving family demanded the absolute best. They demanded the finest silver caskets. They wanted the silk linings. They wanted to prove that their boy was a king. The undertakers gladly took the cash. They charged exorbitant fees for these gleaming, heavy silver boxes. They laid the dead gangster inside, surrounded by walls of orchids and lilies. Thousands of people would line the streets to watch the silver casket roll toward the cemetery. The mourners would weep. The rival bosses would send wreaths. But the dirt tells us a different story. After the crowds dispersed, after the weeping mothers and the grim-faced hitmen walked away from the gravesite, the undertakers went to work. They didn't bury the silver. They pulled the dead mobster out of that pristine silver shell. They shoved his rigid body into a cheap, heavy cast iron coffin, and they dropped the iron into the ground. The silver casket went right back into the undertaker's showroom, wiped clean, waiting to be sold to the next grieving crime family at full price. They sold the same silver casket over and over again. The mobsters thought they were burying kings. They were just renting the silver. They spent eternity in cold cast iron. Even Al Capone couldn't escape the heavy iron and stone. He didn't die in a hail of bullets. The government couldn't pin the murders on him. They finally got him for not paying his taxes. He went to Alcatraz, his mind slowly rotting away from syphilis. When he finally died in his bed in 1947, his body was placed in a $2,000 massive bronze casket. His family shipped his body to Chicago, using a decoy coffin on the train just to fool the press. At Mount Olivet, the ground was frozen solid. It took grave diggers 3 hours to hack a hole in the dirt. His casket was lowered, and a heavy, ornate vault was dropped over it. Heavy iron and stone to keep the world out. Look at the ledger. The government, tasked with protecting the people, dumped lethal chemicals into the vats. 10,000 desperate people drank it and died in agony, chasing a cheap escape from the cold. The bootleggers who sold it became millionaires. They bought politicians. They bought judges. They wore diamond belt buckles and drove armored cars. They shot each other in flower shops and restaurants, bleeding out on the tile. And at the end of the line, the undertaker smiled, took their bloody money, and dropped them into a cheap cast iron box. No one was innocent. Everyone was a mark. The poison trickled all the way down, from the Treasury Department to the speakeasy, right into the graveyard. The rain isn't letting up tonight. Stay dry out there, keep your doors locked, and if someone offers you a drink from an unmarked bottle, politely decline. This is Vesper Klein. The midnight box is closed.